let you know this meeting is being recorded. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lori Yoakum. I am the director here at Wilson Public Library. Today, we are doing a community chat, and we have members of the Cozad Ambassadors with us. I'm actually going to have you all introduce yourselves and tell us how long you have been a Cozad Ambassador, and then we'll just let people talk and we'll chat today. We'll start with Tim.
Okay, well, I'm Tim Hansen, and I really can't tell you how long I've been a Cozad Ambassador, but quite some long time, more than, probably close to 20 years, because I started when I was still a full-time employee at the school.
All right, well, just to remind you that 20 years ago is 2005. Did you want to adjust your time at all?
That was probably longer ago than that.
Welcome, Chuck.
I'm Chuck Bergen. I've been an ambassador since I think 2016. So I know right now that I'm the newbie amongst all of us sitting here as ambassadors.
My name's Scott Truesdale, and I was an original ambassador. We were formed in 1987.
So you guys are not quite celebrating that anniversary. In 2 years you will be.
Yeah, and I'm Roseanne Truesdale. I wasn't Truesdale when I originally was an ambassador, also in 1987.
So you are both original members?
I don't know that there are any others.
Maybe Linda Gadway.
Linda Gadway, I think is.
Well, so let's just start with how this came to be. You
Well,
guys would know.
ambassadors is basically the PR branch of the Chamber of Commerce, and the ambassadors were formed pursuant to the auspices of the Chamber of Commerce. I think at the time Jim Acker was the president of the chamber, and this was kind of his idea. And we were formed, I know, in October, because I ended up being the president for the first 15 months.
I thought you were going to say years.
So we started out as a smaller group. It has grown some. It has morphed a lot. And, it's been mostly fun.
I heard through the grapevine that when the ambassadors started, you all wore special jackets. Is that right?
We had red jackets.
Red blazers with a little gold and black logo that attached to the pocket.
And it has morphed. How? Do you still have the red blazers?
Nope, we do
They're
not.
no longer red and they no longer fit.
We have a lot, now we're into these more comfortable,
Oh, yeah. Oh, I see.
and
Tim's got a
polo shirts,
sweatshirt
and
that we
we
wore one time.
still wear white, rather Western looking shirts for some things. When we serve for what used to be called the Farmer Rancher Banquet, Farmer Businessman Banquet. We usually wear white shirts with jeans and.
A lot of times we'll wear those jeans and white shirts when we're taking the stagecoach someplace.
Okay, so do the ambassadors own the stagecoach?
No. Stagecoach is owned by the Chamber of Commerce. It was purchased in the late 1940s by Erling German. Probably in the 90s, maybe the 2000s, we undertook a project to have it completely redone.
And that was a Yellowstone coach, is that right?
Pardon me?
Was that a Yellowstone coach?
It was from Yellowstone. President Taft used it to tour Yellowstone Park. So it's actually a touring coach rather than a stagecoach. But it's been all redone. Ambassadors raised all the funds to completely redo it. And then they raised all the funds to have a trailer special made so that it fits in that trailer.
That trailer has a special wrap on it too, doesn't it?
It
Is it
does.
about the ambassadors or is it just about the stagecoach?
It's both perhaps, but it's a picture. Lynn Meyer pulled the stagecoach for a long time. And it has a picture of Lynn in the driver's seat. and some of the ambassadors and the stagecoach wrapped onto the trailer. We have had occasions when we've taken the coach through the parade and then pulled the trailer through the parade, so.
The trailer's almost as much fun as the coach
Yeah.
in some respects, so probably kids.
So you say that you are the PR arm of the chamber. What does that mean? What does that entail?
I think we're trying to paint a positive outlook for people, particularly like a new business comes in. We try and get as many people there for the ribbon cutting as we possibly can, make them feel good about being in the business. But also to help remind our people who've lived here for a long time that we have an amazing downtown community and they need to take advantage of that and support those local businesses. So we try and do a lot of that. And then we travel to Gothenburg to the parade and Lexington to the parade and South Dakota and all over Frontier Days. They've been a lot of places and trying to point out how fortunate we are to have the community that we've got here.
Where's the farthest that you've gone on parade?
Cheyenne, Wyoming, maybe? Is that the furthest we've gone?
It's been to Yellowstone.
Well,
That-
no.
We didn't go on that trip.
That's
There
true.
was a trip to Yellowstone. We've been to.
Did they take the touring coach back?
Yeah.
And they
Yes.
did.
Mhm.
Len went and took his horses. Then we
Wasn't there a bunch
been
of, wasn't there a bunch of stage coaches and stuff there too?
It was
a
part
whole-
of the
that was-
commemorative.
That was part of the
Mhm.
reason that
That's
it went. I've seen pictures of that.
And then we've been took it to Deadwood for the Deadwood Days of '76.
Yes, you were.
I'm guessing Nebraska Land Days you probably go to.
Yes, almost every year. We've missed a few years.
Do you do the Harvest of Harmony? Do they have parades still for that or is that just bands?
Never done that. That's more of
But we have been to Grand Island for State Fair.
a state fair, yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And it seems to me like when we had the coach redone, didn't the guy that did that point out to us that we have the only one of those Yellowstone coaches that size that's not in a museum or something someplace? That there are others
It's actually
around,
used.
but they're the smaller ones.
It's also been to the state fair in Lincoln before it moved to Grand Island, so.
Okay, so you do parades, you do ribbon cuttings. What other types of things?
Well, one of the
do you
things
do?
we do at our monthly meeting is we have a list of upcoming community events that we remind everybody of these events, so people can get them on their calendar to go. And then also we have the list of what went on last month and we report, hey, how was the attendance? Did anybody go to this? What's the feedback, to kind of keep ourselves in front of the community. And, it can be very disheartening for an event if you're doing something and nobody shows up, so it gives a few more.
Kind of like this?
Yeah.
Yes.
It gives a
It
few
is,
more,
Chuck
a few
and
more
I were
bodies.
talking, because Chuck comes to quite a few of these. And generally, would you say we maybe have 4 or 5 people in total?
Sounds about right, yeah.
Sometimes we have more,
Mhm.
but I'm always surprised at how many click on the link. And I don't know if they watch the whole thing, but they definitely click on the link. We usually have 20 people do
That's
that,
good.
so.
One of the other things that we do that has been very close to me because of my job, when I actually had a job, and that is giving a scholarship. And the requirement to be eligible for the scholarship is the student has to have worked for a Chamber of Commerce member. And it's not just based on their grade point average, how good they were, basketball or whatever, but they have to write an essay about their job and what they learned from it. And some of those essays are amazing. And so a few years ago, I've been on the judging selection committee for a long time, is I started sharing those with the chamber members at their board of directors meeting so that they could read through some of those and think, yeah, I did make a difference in that kid's life, didn't I? And some of them, that almost brings tears to your eyes when those kids talk about what they learned from their job. So
So that's another thing. Have you ever thought of having like a teen version of the Cozad Ambassadors?
how would what?
A teen version of the Cozad Ambassadors?
Not that I'm aware of, we never thought of that.
And I find the ambassadors be interesting. I think because I've been chamber members in 3 different communities that had ambassadors. And they're all set up very similar. If you go back far enough, they all, I mean, you had to be, in some of them, you had to be asked to be an ambassador. And they all had requirements for attendance. You had to attend so many meetings, you had to attend so many events. And just these 3 different chamber organizations, that's what they all did. And they all had a tendency to be some, what I would call your movers and shakers in the community who were members of the ambassadors. It was something to be an ambassador way back in the day. And I find that interesting that they all had those different requirements that you had to, or otherwise you could get kicked out.
Well, that was my next question. Scott, you had talked about that it had morphed, the ambassadors had morphed from the beginning. How do you become a member, and what are the requirements?
We're always looking for members when we see somebody who appears to be quite active in the community. And some of us aren't spring chickens anymore, so we're always looking for younger members who give us a little more energy and a little different input than you might get from somebody who's middle-aged like I am.
And
But, middle age moves right along with it. But,
And we've moved away from the requirements of so many meetings, so many events. We still like to
To an
encourage people to
extent.
do.
everybody's situation's different.
Yeah.
I can make most of the events unless they interfere with a golf game but some of the younger members have kids' activities, employment activities, things of that nature, which limit what they can do.
Well, limit, but then sometimes I'm sure they probably overlap too, so.
Yeah.
we are often asked to help with events, community events, such as the businessmen farmer barbecue, tailwinds,
Cozad 150.
yeah, things like that. And that's part of what the group does too. And so, for people who are interested in being a member of the ambassadors, it's something they need to be aware of, that you're going to be asked to serve.
It's a doing
Not just
committee.
go to a meeting. You're going to be asked to help with events and things. And so that has to be something you want to do. Doesn't do a lot of good to get members who either don't have the time or the interest in participating.
Yeah.
So,
We meet once a month through the lunch hour, and we always eat at a chamber member, and we try to rotate so that we don't duplicate that during the year. Our meeting tomorrow is at the Grand Generation Center, and so we get to interact with some people there that we might not normally.
Do you always meet on Wednesdays? No,
Thursdays.
Thursdays. Gosh,
Did you miss
sorry,
any
I
this
missed a
week,
couple of
Lori?
days.
I thought I missed Monday, so I was right with you, but yeah, it's always the first Thursday except this month because the first Thursday was a little early.
And you mentioned about, possibility of student type of group, and because of my connection with the school, our curriculum has changed so much over the length of time that I've been here. We used to have a couple of student business groups that were pretty active, but that's kind
Oh,
of,
yeah, there used to be an FBLA.
yeah.
There isn't anymore
And
though.
not like we used to have. We have a person at the school, Dawn Beans, who does a lot of neat things, sponsored a couple different organizations, but people also don't realize we have so many more girls now involved in sports than we used to have some time back. When we did the construction project at school, I was kind of on their calling committee, and a good friend of mine who graduated from that high school said, I'm all in favor of it, but what do we need another gym for? And I said, well, how many girls' sports did we have when you were in school? Well, none, but that's well.
Well, as an example, the girls' junior high wrestling team is using one of the smaller rooms at the wellness center because that's the only place they have to practice.
And we still have 7th and 8th grade games
And that's
scheduled
with
over in
an
the
additional
elementary,
gym.
yes.
scheduled over in the elementary building, which kind of interferes with their after zone stuff and things like that. So there has to be a lot of compromising going on. And when we built that middle school, we didn't build a gym. You know, so the middle school kids actually used the barn most of the time for PE classes.
Well,
There's
and now
something
you
going
don't
on.
have East Elementary either, because that had that room.
Yeah,
East or.
Sorry, Nora. I'm not from here originally. Give me a break.
I've actually helped Mr. Nutt, the golf coach, practice golf at North Elementary Gym. That's quite an experience.
Should have attended North Grade School.
Yeah, you know, why did they call it north instead of west?
Because it was on the north edge of town when
It
it was built.
was in 1950,
16th Street was the north edge of town.
50 probably when it was built. 16th Street was a rural gravel road,
Oh, gosh.
so.
So the high school was out of town?
When East was built, then it was on the same parallel as North, but it was called East. So.
That's funny. I'm getting all sorts of history that I didn't know about. Jose, what kind of questions do you have?
Going back to what you said earlier, Tim, about the scholarships, can you kind of share some success stories of people who were recipients of that scholarship that ended up graduating and maybe coming back to the community? And if you can't think of those people, have you heard of any stories who were recipients of the scholarship and now they're working in like a really big city or somewhere out of state?
I actually got quoted on a thing for the State of Nebraska Education Association about students coming back to Cozad, and my story was, my physician is a former student of mine. My pharmacist is a former student of mine. My lawyer is a former student of mine. The guy who works on my car is a former student of mine, and he's the toughest one to get an appointment with. You know? So, and when I look at some of the other businesses, you know, the electric business going on here in town, owned by a graduate of Cozad High School. And, you know, and if you look at the number of school teachers that we have here at Cozad, who are Cozad graduates, I think it's just amazing. I think it says a tremendous positive thing about this community and the people that those kids grew up knowing that they could go any place and get a job and they want to come back here.
Maybe not immediately.
No, you know, but you get thinking about those people and you know all the people that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Well, just start down Main Street.
Yeah,
Almost every business is owned by someone who went to school there.
yeah. And I can't think of a better compliment to the community and the parents and Sunday school teachers and school teachers that raised those kids. What an impression they must have made that they said, that's where I want to live.
Yeah, as an outsider, I moved here in 2015. That was one of the first things I noticed was the multi-generational with attorneys, dentists that, you know, 3 and 4 generations deep. And you just don't see that necessarily. You might see one in town that has been a multiple generational deal, but I think that speaks a lot for the community when you see somebody goes off and gets, you know, an advanced degree and can take that anywhere, and they choose to come back and start their business with their parent here in town.
Well, to go off of Jose's question, I guess the question first would be, how many years has the ambassadors been getting out a scholarship? Because if you just started in 1987, it hasn't quite been 40 years.
No.
I retired from the school 18 years ago and we were given it when I was still there, so.
I don't remember
I
when
don't
we
think we
started.
did it immediately, but
I don't
probably
know.
shortly after.
You know, one reason we're able to do this, we have an annual fundraiser, which has really kept us solvent
Can you talk about
And-
that for a little
a
bit?
little bit. We do a Husker football pool. We sell pools for people on all the Husker.
100 squares.
100 squares. So the whole season, basically. And that funds our scholarship. It funds a lot of, we were able to give to the Community Foundation, I believe, $3,000
I think
this
so,
year.
yeah. I think so.
that allows us to do things like fix up the stagecoach or take it to a parade somewhere that's out of the area. Pays for the, we had to pay for horses and that type of thing not to buy the horses, but you pay somebody to drive and that
So
kind of thing.
why don't you guys share the one fundraiser I know you did regarding the calendar?
Oh.
I can describe their picture in detail.
That was the early 2000 teens, wasn't it? that you did
Yes,
that?
it had to have been
It was some time
maybe
ago.
90s, maybe.
No, it was in probably 2000.
Now, it'd be in the.
Now, I
2000.
remember Barbara was a part of that.
Yes,
So that's what I'm saying.
Barbara.
So I
Yes.
was director here, so it's
Yeah.
early 2000 teens.
They did
Seems to
it.
me like there was some couple pictured out by Camp Kamika up on top of the hill, one of them in a bathtub.
Was it
looking
at
out over
Camp,
the valley.
was it at Camp Kamika?
It was
It
close.
was up on the top of Greg Witchell's hill.
Oh, the calendar was intended to make it appear like these people were in the nude, but how
They
it was
were.
shot.
They were
So, for
strategically-
example, I remember this guy with a really great golf swing. There's a picture of him teeing off on number one. He's like this. And the sign for the number one tee is strategically covered.
Fortunately, that was a big sign, so you couldn't see much of me.
But that was such a popular calendar. I got a big kick one day when it made its way. I was living in Holdridge at that time. And Kirk Riley was in the calendar. Him and I worked together in Holdridge, so I know it was the early 2000s. That calendar made its way to our bank.
I think that was to help fund the trailer.
I think it was
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Steve
And I'd like to
Anderson
share one-
did
I was
the
gonna say, I remember
Steve
him talking
Anderson
about
did
taking the pictures. and-
pictures and he had great fun with it. He really did. He just,
But
We had to
he
point
had
out
done
how
something
he kinda
similar.
Helped out with some of the physiques, but that he didn't bother with mine, so.
I remember him talking about he had done something similar, maybe with the ladies in Brady.
Yes.
yes, I think he had, yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
he did have. a
It
lot
was
of
I'd like to share one more quick story about our job, our workforce. My daughters are up here visiting from Texas this summer. They live in Houston, Texas. And they're here and they've got a bunch of laundry because they got the little grandkids with and stuff. And so they're gonna do laundry at my place, much more than I would do in one day's time. And partway through, they say, Dad, we think there's something wrong with your washing machine. It might be leaking or something like that. So I call one of my former students who now has a plumbing business here in town, and he goes, God, he said, my guys are out north of town working on something on a farm right now. He said, probably gonna be an hour and a half, 2 hours before they get there. I said, that's fine, whatever. So these guys are also former students of mine, show up and they start looking at it and they determine what's wrong. But then they say, how do you get in your crawl space? We want to go down there and check and make sure that's okay first. Well, that's not a fun place to get to in anybody's house. They're down there and they found some other little thing that was wrong with the dryer or something like that. An hour and a half later, they're gone. Everything works great. And then I get a bill from them like a week later. And unbelievable. I get that bill and I look at that. I can't believe I had two guys here for an hour and a half and that's all it cost me. So I actually took a picture of that bill, sent it to my daughters who are down back in Houston and said, so if you'd have called a plumbing outfit in Houston, Texas, would they have been there within 2 hours? And would the bill have been somewhere in this amount? And it was less than $200. And I go, wow. And I go, well, they might have been there in 2 weeks. And just the call would have cost more than what your total bill was. So here's the two guys down crawling around my crawl space, former students, and the guy that's their supervisor is former student. I'm going, how cool is that you have that kind of support in a community?
And now they're probably chamber members with
Yeah.
the business,
Yes,
so.
I'm sure
Yeah.
they are.
So amazing.
Was your question answered? We just took a really long way around that.
Oh, it was very much answered, yeah. And then I had one for Scott, what he said earlier. So you mentioned that the ambassadors ideally want to attract younger members to be part of the organization. And I guess any of you can answer this question. What kind of strategies have you looked at to recruit, younger people to be part of that organization?
Well, word of mouth mostly. We have 20, almost 30 members, between 25 and 30 members. And we utilize everybody's input to try to come up with people who would do well serving the community. We put the word out a few times in differing ways, but, in order for the organization to remain viable, you've got to get younger people involved.
How old is your youngest?
You wouldn't know it
member?
by looking at this group, but
How old is your youngest member?
I don't know.
30s.
30s, yeah.
I'd say in the 30s.
And those people are people who are very much involved in maybe their own local business or other community activities and stuff like that, which is kind of how they get noticed. And in a meeting, somebody say, you don't want to be an ambassador, and they'll throw out a name and everybody else goes, that's a great idea. So somebody will invite them, but they have to be approved by the current membership to be a member.
And then my other question was, you said you have about 30 members. About how, do all 30 members show up monthly? Or what's a good turnout for
Our
you?
turnouts are
I'd
pretty
say
good.
we have 20
20, yeah,
average.
Yeah, 20 is about the
probably.
average number.
And I think, I don't know where we are with membership. I don't think we're at
Right,
30.
30 was,
I do know
High
that we
20s,
were
yeah.
originally limited to 25 and we expanded that limit at one point in time. So in the original document, there were supposed to be no more than 25 of us. And
It's,
yeah, and the people that don't attend, it's job related,
it's,
I'll use Tammy at the Grand Generation Center. She can't leave at noon. That's her busiest time. So she can't attend any noon meetings. So
Unless it's at the Grand Jury.
unless it's Grand Generation
she'll be
Center.
there this month.
They'll be there this one, but yeah, but and there's a few other people like that too, that their job
Kristen
doesn't
Bennett
allow
has,
them.
she's a member. It's
Right.
difficult for her to be.
And like I tell, whenever I'm trying to sell somebody on joining an organization, I focus on the activities. The last thing I mention is, we meet on Tuesdays or meet on Wednesday, because that's the last thing anybody wants to do is go to another meeting, so focus on those things, the things that we do in the community and for the community. And there are people who don't make the meetings, but when we send out an email regarding there's a ribbon cutting or they're having an open house, those people are showing up. And that's where you really need them. I mean, you don't need them to sit through a meeting every 30 days.
I just actually counted, we have 27 members. We have 3 not included in that 27. The chamber president is always considered an honorary member. Does that person come to the meetings? No, but could if they wanted to. And then like Jordan Starman, director of the chamber, she's at most all of the meetings, and the executive director of the Cozad Development Corporation, Jim McEwen, is also a member. So we've pulled all of those people in, and they're great help. So
We pay annual dues to be a member. And that kind of covers our meals. We pay for our meals out of our dues, basically.
You were talking about, oh gosh, that question just left my brain. Oh, I know. You were talking about events you do. Do the ambassadors have a social media presence? Are they on Facebook? Are they
No,
on
we don't.
Instagram?
No, we do not.
one of the things that we have done is, with Jordan Starman being on there, she'll put stuff in the chamber, stuff that they send out about the ambassadors. So that's probably as close as we come to it.
Well, I think we initially started the little newsletter, which you
Right.
see laying around town. Jordan's picked most of that up at this point in time, but the ambassador did start that process.
Is that one thing, though, that since the ambassadors as a group doesn't have a social presence, is that one area that you're encouraged as an ambassador to share events that you see on your own social media?
Yes, I think so.
I
And we
do
actually
that, yeah.
discussed some of that.
I share, if I see something that's regarding an organization that I'm part of, a lot of times I'm gonna take and share that so that people that aren't friends with, say, the Henry, but they're friends with me, they'll see what we're doing. And so it takes that bigger, it captures that bigger audience
Yeah.
when people are sharing.
So I know, Chuck, that you're a part of my press release, so things from the library go to you, so you can share it with the ambassadors. What would be your suggestion for the community trying to get their information out to more people? Because, you know, the lovely thing about social media is it's there. The worst thing about social media is the algorithms choosing what gets seen. So you could have the best plan to get things out there and it gets buried.
We asked that question in a conference to a marketing expert. He had a hard time answering that because, you know, used to be able to deal was run an ad in the paper, take an ad out on the radio. Says the younger crowd out there, they get all their information here and they get it without ads. They look up their news, they watch a YouTube clip or a news clip on something. They get all their information here. They don't subscribe to a local paper. And again, the algorithms are different. So he had a hard time coming up with a good answer. How do you hit 100% saturation? And his answer was, you really can't.
It kind of takes everybody.
There are two sites on here that, one of them is the Cozad school site. And I'll have people visit with me, because occasionally I sell tickets to games and stuff when you walk in the gate there, and people will say, well, I didn't know they were starting at 4 o'clock. And I'll say, well, did you check the school site? No, didn't know they had it. And then the community has the same thing. You know, I can go over here. And,
City chamber, CDC, et cetera.
yeah. The problem that I see is, for the people who are doing that, it's very difficult to keep everything updated. And so some of the stuff on there is from quite a while back. But at least those two sites are available.
Other questions?
Let's see, just one last question for Tim. I guess it's a two-part question. How many students usually get that scholarship per year, and when does the application open?
Great question.
Well, and it's just changing this year. We have a counselor who's been at the high school for a couple of years now, and she approached me about, could we do that a little bit earlier? So, and I can't give you the exact dates, I don't know, but it's probably moving up about 2 weeks from when it used to be. We have a special night that used to be the first week in May, will now be in April, and that's when the scholarship will be announced.
I think the scholarships actually are open now.
Yeah, the scholarships, a student could go in and see Mrs. Harburg at the school and pick up an application for that scholarship. And she's a lot brighter than I was. She can put a lot of stuff online, and the kid can just pull it up online at home and stuff like that. The one requirement for the Ambassador Scholarship, you have to have had a job with a Chamber of Commerce member. And a lot of times we've given 2 of those scholarships per year, and they're awarded, used to be in May, now it'll be in April, kind of towards the middle of April, to avoid all the conflicts with prom and graduation. You know, parents go crazy those first 2 weeks in May trying to get to everything. So that'll help them. The student does not receive the money at that time. The student receives the money in the middle of their freshman year. They have to bring proof that they are actually enrolled in school for the second semester, and then they get the money payable to them, as opposed to payable to the school.
Is there proof for grades too?
Is there what?
Proof of grades from their first semester?
Yeah, they have to show that that's usually what they do, is they'll bring in their first semester grades and their schedule for second semester. And I kind of threw that idea out. I said, you know, there's a lot of kids that have enough money to start first semester. They got graduation money, they saved money, they had a summer job. Middle of your freshman year, you're going, wow, where'd I blow all that money? You know, they didn't realize, hey, when I'm living in Lincoln and the battery goes bad in my car, Dad doesn't just go get one and put it in there. They had to handle that. So there are a lot of expenses besides just the books and tuition and stuff like that.
Which is good, because I still think you have that, like back in the ancient years when some of us went to college, you kind of had that weed out at the end of 2 weeks or a month of people saying, yeah, this isn't what I thought college was going to be. And so you know, they've kind of created this track record. Yes, this is something they can do.
I know my son's running around right now with his transcripts and proof of second semester.
And one of the things that I really like about the scholarship is the fact that, you know, people don't always necessarily look at the school as a business, which it isn't. Like the guy I called to fix the plumbing at my place, different deal. But when you think about the number of employees that the school district has, you know, when we throw in cooks and custodians and school nurses and secretaries and faculty members and coaches and, you know, substitutes, you know, and it's amazing how many people in Cozad are employed by Cozad City Schools. And how many parents, you know, here it was a cold, not very nice Tuesday night, and how many people did we have come up and watch a basketball game last night? And a good crowd. And, you know, so the school, to me, is really a major focal point of the community also. You say the same thing about the hospital. How many people are employed at our local hospital and stuff like that? We have some pretty significant businesses that we don't think of as a quote business. We have an amazing new superintendent in Cozad this year, and I'm trying to do whatever I can to get him more involved with stuff. Of course, he's a pretty busy first-year guy, but he's a very, very personable guy and very strong community person. So Dr. Endorf will do a good job.
Well, is there anything else for good of cause about the Cozad Ambassadors that we haven't talked about that you would like to put forth?
I would just like to thank Lori for doing this. You know, we talked about morphing. One of the things that's morphed for all organizations is a lot of them become smaller. You know, that people participating in organizations has really dropped off. And I'm sure there's probably a service organization that was here at one time and
Well,
is
I
no
think of like
longer.
the Lions.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of times you don't have that, and you don't have as much encouragement from employers to participate. I remember when I first started working, that was a section on my performance evaluation, community activities. It's not on there in the banking world today. And so people aren't as encouraged as much to participate. So I want to thank you for doing this to give these organizations a chance to fly their flag, so to speak, and point out the things that they do. And hopefully that might encourage somebody out there that attends or listens to your podcast that, hey, maybe there is something I could do.
Yeah, and you and I were talking about that.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of why I started this, was I get questions all the time at the front desk about different things, and I try to veer them toward the right people. But it's like, okay, how can we get information about all these different organizations, whether they are associated with the chamber, or they're associated with the Department of Health, or, you know, any type of state organization. This is kind of what we came up with, so I appreciate you all coming.
Well, I'd like to brag this lady up a little bit. I'm on the Hidden Right Museum board with Chuck, and when we get a artist in residence in the summertime, they let me be the one to show them around town. I take them for a ride out to Camp Kamika and down the Willow Island Road, you know, and show them all the stuff.
How young was this girl?
Well, you know, but
The younger, the longer the trip is, I've noticed.
one of the places that I always bring them is over here to the library. And every one of them goes, wow, you know, for a small town, that's quite the deal. And they look at some of the artwork that we have in here, you know, and the other things that we have going on, and they meet Lori and go, she gets all that done? I go, yeah. So,
I think if,
thank you. How long is this building actually?
They started building it in '97. Prior to that, Scott might have a better answer as far as, I don't know how long it took to convince Lloyd and Catherine to do this. I moved here in '97 and they were building it at that time.
Well, because my wife was a tremendous fan of the library. She Just down here checking out books all the time. Love the place.
I just wanted to mention that, I think being a part of this organization or any organization gives you more a feeling of belonging in a community. If you don't really have any connection with your community. So I think it's important that people think about that, and it benefits us as members probably more than we benefit the community.
Yeah, I think you're right. But I think, I don't know what it is, but in a lot of publications since 2020, they say that loneliness is an epidemic. And so how do you counter loneliness is by getting involved. But I think people get stuck there about, well, how do, they have to ask me. And I don't think people realize that they sometimes can put their foot out, their hand out, and ask to get involved.
Yeah.
That's why I actually was asking about the teens. I know a lot of the teens in high school are really pushed to do community service, but you wonder sometimes, is that just doing it, or is that instilled that it becomes part of who they are? So as Jose asked, how many scholarship winners have come back and started a business here? That is an intriguing question. And are there any scholarship winners who've come back who've become ambassadors? Is another intriguing question. So.
Well, I think it's instillable. I mean, people have asked me, how many different organizations I belong to and activities, and they say, well, where's that come from? That came from my dad. He was very active. He was part of organizations on boards of directors for 30, 40 years, just a lifetime commitment to those kind of things that I just always remember my dad having to rush off the farm for an evening meeting somewhere. And that's what to me, I think. And then having that encouragement at my first job, but I've always been active wherever I've lived. And I also think it helps, even though now, since I'm retired, if it wasn't for active in organizations, I wouldn't know what's going on in this town, because you lose that daily interaction with your fellow employees, whether it's talking about last night's basketball game or sharing the latest gossip about what's going on, but you miss out on that connection. And so I'm a little further removed from that, not having an office to go to every day.
That's interesting that you say that. Last month, we had Cozad Rotary here, and Claude Berrickman and Lyle Davis were here talking about it. And Lyle said something that years ago, all the businessmen essentially used to get together every day, every week, once a week, and had coffee at 10 o'clock. And he said, you just don't see that at all anymore.
Oh, and I had, when I was in Holdridge, I had he had to be in his 90s at that time, a gentleman. And one of his big things was, he said, looking at the chamber used to always be, the board of directors used to always be business owners. And now they're employees of businesses. But he said, I wish we'd go back to that. But, when I got to look at the board that I was in at the time, there wasn't a single business owner there. They're all running their business. But he said, back in the 50s, there was no such thing as having your frontline employee serving on a board of directors for the chamber. It just didn't happen.
Yeah. So as far as things change, you were saying your father instilled being active with you, but I think from my background of education, I think of self-fulfilling prophecy, and Tim will know this, that those kids whose parents aren't involved, that is kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
So how to keep them involved when they're not getting that at home is another interesting.
Cozad's pretty unique. I think, another one I'll just throw out here, not take you, but like our Elks Lodge here. They do a lot of community things. And we're one of the larger Elks Lodges in the state of Nebraska because a lot of communities don't even have one anymore. McCook, much larger community than us, their people who are Elks members are actually members of the Cozad Lodge. They don't have one anymore. And they used to have their own golf course over there. And they do some really neat, fun things. I don't know how many people know what they did this last weekend for fun, but they had a little hunting expedition where they were
Heard
out
about that.
getting rid of scavenger animals that people wanted. And I'm sure they had a great time. I was down in Houston enjoying the warmth when that was going on, but they went out and shot lots of critters.
So here's how active the Elks is. When I came to town, I got approached by someone that was an elk and said, you should, and I said to him, I said, well, years ago, and I know it's no longer there, I was a member back in the early 90s of the Elks Club in Orr. Well, that had closed. And then those records got transferred to Broken Bow. Broken Bow is now closed. He knew the guy who's an elk up there, drives to Broken Bow, looks through the records, and finds that I was a member and I'd been initiated in the Elks, so I didn't have to go through initiation here. That's the kind of proactiveness that some people do in this community. And I just thought that was a pretty big commitment to drive, and I don't know how long he had to look, but I'm sure the records weren't, in the best of shape.
Well, I sure appreciate all of you coming and talking about the
Thank you.
ambassadors.
Thank you.
What's for lunch?
I actually, if you believe this, I have another program that starts at 1, so I did my lunch at 11 today.
So we better
Well, we very much appreciate what you do for the whole community.
Yes.
Like those artists and residents walk out of here going, wow, that's really, and it is really neat. So that's one of the reasons.
Well, I think Cozad.
We appreciate very much your coverage. You do a
Yeah.
great job
Thank
of
you.
covering stuff. You really, really do.
Appreciate it.
There's
Thank you.
some super exciting things happening in Cozad this year, for sure. So with that said, I really wish I could remember who is coming next month.